What it do, cuckolds? It's your boy, the Hater, and as promised, here's a video on one of my favorite stables of all time, the right to censor. Now, I mentioned this in my Stevie Richards video. I don't know when this video is going to release. It might be right after that one, or it might be much later, but I recorded it right after. So we'll see, Stevie Richards, in my opinion, as I said, 9 out of 10 wrestler, phenomenal wrestler. But the highlight of his career by far is one of the greatest stables of all time. I might even say there's a small chance that, there's a few stables that have to go above right to censor, like Main Event Mafia. I thought was just an amazing concept. If you count it as a stable, the alliance between ECW and WCW was just too big to ignore. The Shield was kind of like they were good, but it's like they didn't really do anything. You know what I mean? They were just there fighting people. It was great. It was a great wrestling concept, right? But they didn't even have a gimmick, really. They were just like the Hounds of Justice. What does it even mean? What justice? But whatever, right? And then, of course, you have the NWO and DX, which are classics, the Ministry of Darkness. It's a lot of good stables. But I would put RTC on the same caliber, to be honest. So, for those that don't know, RTC, or Right to Censor, was a group who was basically a parody of these organizations that tried to censor the Attitude Era, right? It's very ironic because the Right to Censor pretty much ultimately won because now we don't have the Attitude Era anymore, right? The premise of Right to Censor was Stevie Richards was essentially a Puritan, right? He did not want people to be exposed to violence, nudity, sexuality, of course, vulgar language. Now, the beautiful thing about this stable that I think a lot of people missed on, right? I understood it even as a kid. But the idea was, obviously, this is a group of hypocrites, right? Yeah, they don't they don't come out naked like Ivory is conservatively dressed. But they are basically these people, and that's why the parody worked so well. Because these are motherfucks that are okay with a bunch of other things in different contexts, right? It's almost like it's okay when we do it. That was the whole point of Right to Censor. Nobody really understood it then because that wasn't even a saying, but it's basically, it's okay when we do it, right? Because they were vicious, right? They would beat people up, they would cheat, they would do all these things, right? But the idea was that they don't want these things to happen, but when they do it, the ends justify the means, right? That's why they were so hateable, right? Aside from the fact that the 90s were a time when things like that were just hateable in general. Now, in addition to that, the formulation of Right to Censor, which in my opinion is one of the greatest formulations in the history of stables, made perfect sense, right? The character progression of everybody, right, was such that everybody had to change drastically to be in Right to Censor, including Stevie Richards, who was the leader, right? Stevie Richards was basically an ECW guy, right? He was out there all violence all the time, right? But now he had a change of heart of some sort. Bull Buchanan was essentially a corrections officer. That was his gimmick. Him and the Big Boss Man were corrections officers, and the implications always were, with Boss Man, it was part of a storyline, but the implications were that these were not good dudes, right? They're the kind of corrections officers that abuse prisoners, right? They are sadistic, evil bastards, right? You don't want these people to even work in prisons because they would just beat up the prisoners because they're big, strong dudes that don't give a flying fuck, right? So even that change from Bull Buchanan, they took the one element of Bull Buchanan. They're like, this is a guy that would fit here for this reason. Of course, Ivory was just a diva, and her campaign was specific to the women's division, right? She was basically saying it's all about sex, and I'm not about that, right? She was like a Molly Holly, right? But an exaggerated version, and a much better version, in my opinion, than the Molly Holly who cut her hair short and everything, Now, the two obviously biggest changes were the Godfather, right? That's the biggest one. He went from the Godfather, a pimp who would come out with hose, to the Good Father. He abandoned that completely. He abandoned all the things that made people love the Godfather, and he became the Good Father. And that's why it was one of the greatest revamps in history. And similarly, Val Venus. Although the switch had already begun by this point, Val Venus ditched the whole porn thing, and he became Val Venus the wrestler, ultimately culminating with Val Venus, the Right to Censor guy, right? He was a former porn star who had seen the error of his ways and or was brainwashed by Stevie Richards. Take it how you want it. Now, as if this weren't good enough, right? The mic skills of Stevie Richards and the fact that they paired him up with three of the most intimidating guys in WWE at the time, right? Bull Buchanan, for sure. Godfather, for sure, and even Val Venus. And I know Val Venus wasn't like an intimidating guy because he was like a fun-loving character, but he's a big, strong guy. And Ivory was also perfect. If they could have gotten China, that would have been better, but they couldn't. They got Ivory. She had like an incredible, title run and a very, very, very important women's match at WrestleMania where China eventually squashed her and became the champion. In my opinion, that is the best women's match in WrestleMania history. Not the match itself, because that was a squash match, but the build-up for it was insane, motherfuckers. People were actually looking forward to it. It was one of the main events, no matter how you cut it, right? Before there was Becky Lynch and all this other crap. This was an incredible storyline where China was finally going after women, so the implications were she's going to destroy everybody, right? But Ivory had beaten her because China got like injured in the ring, and Ivory like got one over her, and Ivory was so protected at this time, right? She like the right Censor would help her win, etc., etc. So all this stuff was just really, really well done. In addition, obviously, Bull Buchanan and Goodfather became tag team champions, which I believe was the only time that the Godfather basically won a tag team title. I could be wrong about that. But, I'm pretty sure I'm right. You know what I'm saying? Like, the Godfather had some success. He was an Intercontinental Champion, but he had a tag team with like D'Lo Brown that led to nothing. And as far as I know, Godfather is only an Intercontinental Champion one time and a tag team champion one time. And that's obviously, as a result, that's definitely a career highlight for him, even though he hated doing that, right? And Godfather was a guy who had like an incredible career, not many titles, but an incredible career. Like he was like, Papa Shango. He was so many things. Like he's great. Now, with all that being said, Cucks, the Right to Censor was more than just the Goodfather and Bull Buchanan and everybody else. It was a vehicle, right? It was a vehicle that was used to push forward so many other wrestlers, right? As a result of the Right to Censor, Taz and Spike Dudley got into a feud with them, and they became tag team champions. The APA really solidified their shift from the Acolytes to the APA. Nobody talks about this, but in order for the Acolytes to become the APA, they had to do some APA shit, right? And, playing poker with like the door and doing protections was one thing. Another thing was there are these like rambunctious, like basically like bar tough guys, right? They're going to drink, they're going to smoke cigars, they're going to kick some ass. Now, the group that's the most against this conceptually is Right to Censor, right? Taz is a violent guy, so it's a perfect fit. They got the cat, Miss Kitty, to forcibly join Right to Censor. And this led to like Jerry the King Lawler like fighting them as well, right? So they were like all over the place. And then perhaps most importantly, right, there was an entire like feud with Ivory and China that I mentioned, and they had like a match. It was like Val Venus versus China, because China was an intergender wrestler. She wrestled both, right? And it's all these little underpinnings, right, that led to like so many other people getting a push. One of the greatest moments in the career of the Dudley Boys, which they've had many, right, was when the Dudley Boys essentially, this was kind of silly, but they basically screw the Hardys, right? Like the Hardy Boys were going to win the titles against Right to Censor. But the Dudley Boys come out dressed like Right to Censor, and they stop the Hardy Boys. So you're like, oh my God, the Dudleys joined Right to Censor, right? And then next week they're like, if putting people through tables is wrong, then I don't want to be right. And they turned on them immediately. It was all a ruse. And the fans started cheering, but I'm like, I was a big Hardy Boys fan. I'm like, the fuck? Why do you have to do this at the expense of the Hardy Boys? Like, well, whatever, it is what it is. I guess they wanted to be the tag team champions themselves. But the point is, it was very, very, very well done. And the biggest metric, in my opinion, there's two. The two biggest metrics of gauging a stable success, in my personal opinion, are one, the longevity that the stable has in the collective memory of wrestling fans. People will never forget Right to Censor. And two, the impact. As I just said, the impact was unprecedented. Not only did everything that I just say happen, but they were on Raw every week, and they were getting massive heat every week, right? And they even had some fans, of course, because the gimmick was so over the top and so entertaining, right? That they combined this it was a very weird thing that's never been done since, where there is like a comedic element to it, right? Where like it wouldn't be, it would be hilarious, for example, for the Dudley Boys to do the what's up on Ivory, right? Because she's a prude, you know what I mean? But there was also this like sadistic, like almost like an evil that was housed within Stevie Richards and the rest of the RTC, where they really didn't want you to have fun, right? On a level where like they'll beat you up so you don't have fun. And that's sinister. So in summation, right, to Censor in stable review, which is my new thing now. I just invented it this moment. They got a 10 out of 10. Stable review is going to be a thing now, cucks. Wow, I can't believe like I just came up with that at the end of this video. So with that being said, take care of yourselves, cuckies.